Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Mark Silvestri Day. That is why we are looking at the next issue in his early 1990s Wolverine run. It is issue 43, cover dated early August 1991. We're going to start with the cover. First thing I want to mention about this cover, one of the first examples, I believe, even prior issues, the covers were inked by Dan Green, but it seems like Silvestri inked himself here. And this is a good example of Silvestri inking himself before he kind of integrates more of that West Coast Jim Lee kind of style into his artwork. Maybe he was starting to do that a little bit here, but I really do feel kind of the full Silvestri vibe with this cover, and I really do appreciate it. Not that Dan Green's been doing a bad job. He's been doing a great job on the inking on the interiors, and I'm sure that's helping out Mark Silvestri a lot because we're still in that run where he's doing bi-weekly issues. So issues are coming out every 2 weeks. So he's really, having to draw pretty quickly, I assume, to meet those deadlines. Just something about this cover I think is really awesome. We're getting the full Silvestri style. This is kind of, again, late Wolverine, early Cyberforce style that I think is, once again, peak Silvestri. Most of the artists here who become image artists in my reviews, I've talked about, Tom McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Sam Keith, Dale Keown, and Eric Larson, I don't think I mentioned. Right now in my reviews, we've pretty much reached what I consider their peak artistic moment in all of their runs, usually being, I'll mention again, the end of their stuff that they do for Marvel and the beginning of the stuff they do for Image. That's kind of the sweet spot for me, at least. So again, great to see a fully Silvestri realized and drawn illustrated cover. One thing I want to mention about this cover is the kind of weird and interesting colors here that, if you really pay attention to, looks a little odd and really, I don't think logically should make sense or work. But for some reason, I think it works really well on this cover. It's kind of impressionistic, if we're going to go with like art movements and stuff. Maybe this is like, the beginning of computer coloring, because I feel the distinctions between, the different shades and stuff is a little odd, and that weird highlight, the white highlight around it. But yeah, there's just something I think color-wise that's really cool about this cover. It's using those complementaries, right? We got kind of orangey reds and some blues. Works really well. And I got to say, this is probably, if not my most favorite Wolverine issues, definitely one of my favorite Wolverine issues. It's one that's kind of stuck in my head since I was a kid. This is early on. I think my first Wolverine, serious collecting issue was 41 or 42, just before this. And I remember this issue really leaving a mark with me. So let's stop talking about it and open her up and have a look at what's going on in there. I would consider this issue kind of to be like a one-shot, one-issue story, although the writer is clever enough to still integrate, the beginning of this is definitely the continuation of last issue, and by the end of this issue, it'll lead seamlessly, continuing the story from prior issues next issue. But it's almost like there's a bit of a stop in the story here to do something a little bit different, as you'll see. So great establishing shot. We got Nick Fury here from last issue. Wolverine is on the helicopter. Has been taken in with Sabretooth and LCD and all these other characters. Sabretooth has jumped out of the helicopter. So Wolverine's basically asking to be dropped off somewhere, I believe in New York, if I'm not mistaken. Creative team, script, Larry Hama. Breakdowns, Mark Silvestri. Finishes, Dan Green. So if, I guess in this case, Mark Silvestri's doing breakdowns, got to be pretty light, fairly quick penciling. But I get a sense that he must be laying down some still fairly detailed pencils, because it still feels very much like Silvestri. So yeah, Midtown Manhattan is where they are, and Nick Fury's kind of giving Wolverine shit about having them fly over New York and stuff. He's Wolverine says, "I didn't ask you to land the helicopter, Nicholas." I think it's funny that he calls him Nicholas. "Just hover it over that rooftop and I'll jump the rest of the way." Right? So the old superhero trope of jumping out of planes and landing, doing the superhero landing. So that's kind of what we got here. Cable as well was a guest star in the last few issues, so he's on the helicopter as well. But this is kind of just, like I said, reminding us of what happened in the last few issues, and Wolverine going off on his own just kind of needs a bit of time to think, I guess, clear his head. I guess this is some sort of representation of Times Square. Maybe a good example of this bi-weekly schedule. Some things are drawn fairly quickly. I think it's effective though at establishing that Times Square vibe for sure. It's almost kind of impressionistic as well, not realistic, almost like a montage of some sort, right? But it works. Lets us know what's happening. Still get some B story here with the characters from the last few issues, and kind of bringing us back and showing us what's happened with Albert. In this case, LCD, her body exploded, but the head is still, conscious, but it needs some sort of, I think, power source so as to not eventually shut down, if I'm not mistaken. So Albert's kind of, taking her down to the Morlocks here in search of help for that. And here's, I think, where the issue really kind of becomes that epic kind of Wolverine story or typical Wolverine story. I don't know for sure. We've seen this before in X-Men. He's, kind of reverting back to his wild side, running through the woods and stuff. I guess in this case it's New York, so it's Central Park, not really the woods, right? But as close as he can get to in New York. Wolverine is based on an animal that is a Wolverine that is in the weasel family, but we often kind of use the wolf trope or the wolfman kind of vibe for Wolverine. So I think this shot here with a full moon is really playing into that werewolf kind of aspect of Wolverine, right? Which doesn't get mentioned a lot, but yeah, I mean, he's basically, kind of I look at him here and I have to think maybe some of what I liked about Wolverine and this issue is it kind of reminds me of the Wolfman in Monster Squad, right? I think he's pretty close to this look here. So I really liked Monster Squad as a kid, so maybe that had a little bit to do with why I like this issue as well. So he gets a sense he says there's something out there howling back at me, something in torment, something in need of help. So where? So he's moving, we're going to assume towards the zoo, right? I don't think Central Park, maybe back then, the early 90s, Central Park still had a zoo. I've been in New York, in the early 2000s a few times up to now, and I don't think there's still a zoo in Central Park. I'd be surprised. So he's, going through the zoo trying to figure out who's in torment or which animal, and he comes up to a Wolverine in a cage, right? So he realizes that it's the Wolverine from the blood here, right? So he knows it's been injured somehow and there's a problem there. That's probably why it's so pissed off. Pretty good depiction of a Wolverine, I would say. It's clear that he did look at some sort of photo reference for that. And then we're introduced to this gentleman here, who at first we're like, he's kind of some deranged, mentally ill zookeeper, right? Which is easy to assume, from his costume here. We're getting some more cool representations of the actual Wolverine here, referenced, I feel, right? Like this one too. And of course, our kind of crazy zookeeper here attacks Wolverine. Obviously, we know that's not going to do much of anything. Pulls a gun on him. And Wolverine obviously is quick enough here and, I'm not quite sure. This is a weird bit of storytelling, where, the gun goes off. Storytelling here is fine. But then the blam and what happens in this panel here is a little bit of a mystery to me, just reading wise. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but it gets resolved and we see it here, I guess, where Wolverine's actually put his claw through the barrel, and I guess that's made the gun explode when he pulled the actual trigger on the gun. Another thing I do want to mention, just small little details I think are cool in the nails here, right? How his nails are kind of crackly and broken up, right? Even though it's drawn very quickly, I think that's a very, simple, effective, and evocative detail. Now, as the garbage falls over, we get a sense of some sort of silhouette here. Maybe it's meant to be a little bit obscure, not quite sure. But then what we realize is that the actual zookeeper has been killed by our deranged gentleman, and he's just wearing his uniform. So Wolverine figures out that this guy's been pretty busy, as he says, and he's been, hurting people and animals. So it's time to kind of level the playing field, and Wolverine cuts open the lock and lets this actual live Wolverine come out. Something kind of weird in the art here. As a kid, I didn't, honestly, even though I'm from Canada, I kind of knew a little bit about Wolverines, but, we didn't have the internet or stuff. Might have seen a picture in a book. I got the sense as a kid when I saw this that this Wolverine is huge. In reality, Wolverine is based on the animal, and he's in the comics small and diminutive because the animal is. So it was just kind of odd to me here that the Wolverine seems to me like to be almost the size of a bear or a wolf, right? Even in relation to Wolverine here. Maybe that's just for effect, make him more menacing in this case, as he's running after our mentally deranged zookeeper. But I always thought it was odd once I figured out and found out that Wolverines are actually pretty small. If I can kind of show you on camera, Wolverines are maybe just, they're a little bigger than a skunk, maybe. But they're just, size doesn't matter in that case because they're just gnarly, very vicious animals and very tenacious as well, right? Which is why Wolverine is kind of, the way he is and in his personality and his size and stature and stuff, because he's based on the characteristics of an actual Wolverine, right? Makes sense? So, great silhouette here. I think is really good, very effective, and deadline friendly as well. And there you go. There's just kind of a bit of a morality play story with Wolverine there, I guess. But yeah, I just always thought this was a very, very effective story. And then we move back into our regular kind of continuing storyline here with Lady Deathstrike, still somehow interested in Wolverine. And this odd kind of sequence with Sabretooth, I know he jumped out of the helicopter last issue, but I always wondered, here we just see his head. For some reason, as a kid, I was like, man, has his head been severed and cut off? Is it just a head? So these two panels were always just very odd to me. We found out later that obviously that's not the case in later issues. But yeah, just the art here to me is a very kind of odd one. This panel in its depiction and kind of the confusion of, is it just a head? Maybe just, if he had pulled back a bit and we'd see more of his body in the water and stuff, that would gotten rid of that effect there. And to be continued in 2 weeks, because that is a killer deadline that they are on in around this time. Few of the artists in the late 80s, early 90s kind of did this bi-weekly schedule. Kind of crazy, but yeah, it was probably very lucrative for them, I guess. That would be one of the reasons why you do it. And this is just kind of a classic pinup. I don't know why they throw this in there. Maybe there was a run of Wolverine issues where they had pinups and they kind of bring it back and then it disappears. So kind of part of that, I guess, some art that they just thought was really cool and didn't want to go to waste. It is a pretty good pinup, I would say. Very cool. And there you have it. That is the end of the issue. Wolverine 43. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, answers to some of my questions, hit me up in the comments below. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the insider knowledge that I'm not aware of, that I'd love to learn about. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Those of you who are already subscribed, thank you so much. Those of you who are not, please, if you're viewing the videos and you enjoy them, subscribe. It really helps the channel, helps get us out there, and helps motivate us to put out more content like the stuff, hopefully, that you're appreciating, like this video here. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and everybody out there, have a great day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.